Hello, and this is Group 8 presenting the results of the case study 1, OkCupid Exploratory Data Analysis. What we're doing in this exercise, we're looking at the OkCupid data, analyzing it, and generating some insights that would be useful for our marketing and sales team. In the first part of the presentation, we'll look at the data cleaning steps that all of us undertook to analyze the data. And in the second part of the presentation, we review the key findings from the analysis and also provide some recommendations to the marketing and sales team. With regard to data cleaning and data preparation, there are 4 major steps that all of us undertook. We checked for missing data and imputed missing values for the income variable, which is one of the very few numeric variables in the data set. Also identified outliers in the data set and removed them where appropriate. We converted character class data, which comprises the majority of the data in the data set, into factors to facilitate the analysis and visualizations for this case study. Finally, we merged the main data set profiles with additional data sets to make the final data set more comprehensive. So let's look at the first insight.
Hi, Marina. Thank you very much. This is the first insight, which is about the user income and education distribution. So we basically explored the data to find out what is the relationship between income and education and how it can be used by the sales and marketing teams to basically enhance their operations and planning. So to go along with the steps, what I have here is the way we did it is basically we used the income and education information from OkCupid database, and from the data we basically removed the missing information that was there for any income and replaced it with the mean value. This is the imputation that Marina was talking about earlier, and eventually we basically removed some records which had some missing categorical information which we could not impute, and so we had to remove those records. Finally, we refined the education and the education status information from a single column to multiple columns, and we basically converted them into fact level information so that we can use it for the analysis. The plots that we generated there were 4 separate plots that we generated. 2 of them were density plots. One of them was a heat plot, and one is a graph plot. Basically, all these, the first two plots basically cover the information about the density information related to income and education. And the last 2 plots are basically arranged by the information that is above and below the mean average income. So can we go to the next slide, please, Marina? So here are the 4 plots that I was talking about. And this gives a very graphic information about the income and the education distribution. The first slide in the top left gives the density of the information, and the transparency of the plot basically gives you more insight into how they overlapped with each other and which has the maximum and minimum. And it tells you, given the education type, have they been earning more, so that the marketing can segment this group of people and appropriately target their products and marketing schemes. A similar information is presented to the right. Again, this is a density plot, but it's more separated, so there's no overlapping, but overlap is in terms of the axis. Basically, the x-axis shows all the income, and the vertical axis has separated graphs so that you can see it more clearly. Finally, the last 2 graphs is more about the average income, above and below average income. The tree map on the left-hand side basically gives you information about the graduation, basically about the education status, like graduate, working, or drought. And they are basically divided into separate areas so that you can drill down and get to that information. And you can see with the sizes of the plots, so you can basically find out which one has the above average or below average groups. And we can target this information for further use in the business. The last plot is basically the income and average income, basically the income above and below the average income plotted as a graph. So the nodes can, the intensity of the nodes can give you, the lines across the nodes give you more information as to where it is more dense and where it's less dense, and what type of education and what type of income can be used to target products and other planning and marketing ideas. So this is basically the plots, and the final conclusion I would conclude in the next slide. Marina, can you please? Thank you very much. So the last slide basically summarizes all the information that can be utilized by the business groups. So the company, product planning, designing, marketing, and distribution, and customer satisfaction can be optimized basically by using this market segments. So these are covered by these bullets, basically telling you that the company operations and planning and marketing groups can, and even distribution can utilize all these market segments and make use of the insights from this database. Thank you very much. And I think Mark can continue for the next slide.
Thank you. So this is Mark Sabry. I am presenting the Insight 2 and 3 for the team. For the Insight 2 and 3, we focused on the spatial distribution. We used basically 3 data sets that we were offered. The OkCupid data, plus the coordinate data, as well as the census data. In these 3 data sets, the location information was common, so that was the base for merging the data, so creating a data set that shows the users, the locations of users, and the population in each of these areas. To make the presentation more meaningful, we excluded all the data that are located far from the San Francisco general area. So we excluded that. And as part of the user percentage in each area, we divided the number of users in the OkCupid data by the population in each area. And this was basically inspired by the advances in the marketing tools that allows local and very effective advertising. So we're hoping that these insights can help our local advertising. Next slide, please. So in this map distribution, we show the gender gap in the general area of the San Francisco. So the colors shows the density of the users, and the boxes shows the gender gap in that area. So the highest gender gap we see in Palo Alto as well as San Mateo, and in San Francisco area, which is the highest number of the users, we see a 35% gap. So obviously we think that as part of the marketing, we have to try and attempt to reduce the gap between the number of male and female users. An interesting observation here was that the Oakland area, which is the 3rd most populous area of the users, has just only 6% in the gender gap. And we haven't shown that in the diagram because this image only shows the top 10 highest gaps. I think that gives some further information for us to analyze that why in the Oakland area we have a low gap and other area a high gap, and that can be used for our marketing campaign. Next, please. Yes, the next insight is basically we use the census data and the number of users. And we use that by dividing number of users by the population. To make it more meaningful, we excluded the areas that are very low in the number of users. We think that like having 5 or 10 or 20 users in one area cannot be enough to make any statistical inference. So we excluded that data from this next slide that I'm going to show you. Yes, this is the distribution of the users. On the left, we see the female basically usage. And in the right, we see male usage, percentage of the users versus the population. In each side of this image, we have the top 3 most percentage of use and the lowest, top lowest percentage of use. So as we see here is that like in Oakland, San Francisco, and Berkeley, we have the highest usage for the female, and Menlo Park, Daly City, and Hayward have the lowest. On the right, we see again the San Francisco has a high percentage of the users, Oakland and Berkeley too, for the male. And I think this gives us some input to better target male, female in each area to increase the users. Next slide, please. We think that the spatial information and distribution are very valuable to create targeted, localized advertising. And further, it can be customized to male and female by some data mining. Thank you.
Finally, we're looking at the relationship between religion and several variables such as age, gender, and orientation. Again, we clean the religion and age data, and when it comes to religion, the religion variable had 2 statements within that variable. One was the religious affiliation, and the second part of that statement was related to individual user feelings about their religious beliefs. So we separated the first statement, which identified the religion affiliation, from the rest of the statement, and that's how we generated a new variable, religion. We also subset our data by religion and age, and we calculated ratios to generate stacked bars. And we also use ggplot2 to create a box plot and stacked bar charts. So on these charts, we see the relationship between religion and age, gender, and orientation. What we see is that users tend to be more religious as they become older, which isn't really surprising at all. We see that users who identify with Judaism, they become more religious as the age increases, and the same is true for Buddhism, for example. We see that female users tend to be more religious. For example, if we look at agnosticism and atheism, male users tend to dominate those segments. Hinduism and Islam are probably the 2 exceptions. That's where female users are in the minority. When we look at the relationship between religion and age, users who identify with Hinduism and Islam tend to be younger than the rest of the users. And also, when we looked at the relationship between religion and orientation, we see that Buddhism and atheism are 2 religious affiliations that have users with the most diverse background, users who are bisexual, gay, or straight. So looking at some of the key observations, We think that to increase the number of older users, we need to communicate to the target audience using religion-related content, using communication channels that mature audience tends to utilize more often. And we also know that the Hindu and Islamic population might be specific targets for those campaigns. And with that, we'd like to thank you for your attention and complete our presentation.
Thank you.